And introducing tonight's host, it's Mr. Tim Crook.
Hello, hello, hello. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I think I have it on good authority that there's about 1 million of you watching live tonight. Maybe not 1 million, maybe it's a couple of hundred, but there are a lot of you watching. So thank you so much for getting involved. I think a couple of hundred, that's about the number of people that on a Saturday morning now queues for St. Leonard's sourdough. So it's fabulous. And it does go to show what a hot potato gentrification is. So let me give you a brief overview of what's going to happen over the next hour and a half. Gentrification, as I'm sure lots of you know, covers a multitude of things. And tonight, we're going to look at the impact of gentrification on the towns of Hastings and St. Leonard's, and hopefully, most importantly, tease out possible solutions, ways to alleviate the impact that it's having on housing locally. Things like voluntary rent caps, community-led housing, bequests, and hopefully lots more, because that's where you, lovely lot, sitting at home, are going to come in with your ideas, we hope. One thing that is not going to happen tonight, and I want to make this very, very clear, tonight is not a finger-pointing exercise. I'm here to MC the show, and my entire brief is to enable a positive and constructive debate. So, no vilification, thank you. Any solutions are going to require significant community-wide involvement. So let's all be positive and all play a part. Right, now, the format of tonight's show is based very loosely on Radio 4's Moral Maze. I say loosely, mainly because I'm hosting it, and I'm incapable of doing anything other than loosely. So I'm going to be your very loose Michael Burke this evening. I don't suppose Michael's ever been described as loose before, but there you go. Right, now we have a fabulous lineup of guests for you tonight, all bringing their own valuable perspective of the housing situation here in Hastings. And we've got music and we've got poetry. But the format, because we're moral mazy, there's going to be 3 witnesses on tonight's show, and each witness is going to give their view of the local housing situation and then take questions from our fabulous panel. And most importantly, as I've said before, questions from you, the audience. So you really are the key to the success of not just tonight's show, but dealing with this issue locally. Changing Hastings' very own Quiva O'Gorman is going to scour the comments for your questions, insights, and solutions, and put those to our witnesses and panelists. So please, this is your town. This event is for you. Please do get involved. Type your comments and questions. And as I say, please keep them positive and constructive. We are where we are. The question is, where are we going? Quite like that. Anyway, right, let's go. First of all, we're going to go over to the quite brilliant Sam Kinch. And Sam is going to give us a bit of context and some statistics and a bit of background to Sam just before I hand over. Sam was born and grew up in Hastings, moved away briefly, moved back, and has done some wonderful things for our community. Not least, we have Sam to thank for the fabulous Hastings Independent Press. And Sam is a brilliant community activist and describes his housing situation as precarious. So, over to you, Sam.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for that. I can't take full credit for the Hastings Independent. There were some great people involved in that at the beginning. And so, yeah, I'm here to give a little bit of a background to what's going on. So just to recap, so Change in Hastings started in 2019, and it was the initiative of a chap called Will, who runs a very popular cafe on the seafront down in St. Leonard's, Goat Ledge. He had arrived in town and he started to notice, I think he'd been here 2 or 3 years at the time, and he started to notice that things were changing. And I think for most people who've lived in Hastings for any length of time, the rapid pace of change is becoming more and more apparent every day. It's hard to ignore. And so Will approached me and my colleague Jess. We're both involved in quite a lot of community activism, particularly around gentrification and around the housing market. And he asked us what could be done. And so we decided to try and set up a public discussion. The first one was 2019, and there's more information on our website, which will be shared throughout the night. And I'll encourage you to go and take a look at that. What I'm going to recap is a whole set of stats that I dug out after that first event. Sorry, for that first event. Let me just share this on my screen. So this is one of the slides that I shared on the first event. So you've got 2 columns there representing stats from 2010 and 2018. You can see at the top there the population. So between 2010 and 2018, our population increased by about sort of 3-ish thousand people. But actually the next column down is about inflow, and the column below that is about outflow to and from the area. So in the case, in the course of 8 years between 2010 and 2018, actually, each year we had about 4,000 people leaving the area, 4,000 people arriving. So which equates to about 10,000 people across that time. So actually between 2010 and 2018, our population as a whole changed by to the tune of about 10,000 people, shifting inwards and outwards. So next column down, next row down, we've got quarterly average house price. So you can see in 2010, £170,000, 2018, more than doubled, 250,000, just almost more than doubled, £250,000. So obviously that represents an increase of about 47%. And I'm going to ask you to just remember a stat for me. That represents about 5.8% yearly. So about 5.8% increase in property prices year on year. Below that, you'll see the median income. So that's for Hastings residents. So in 2010, the median average income for a Hastings resident was 18,200 quid. In 2018, it was 18,700 quid. So an increase of £200 per year for a Hastings resident between 2010 and 2018. And the next two columns below that list some really gory stats, I'd say, which were about homelessness. And you can see the massive jump there between 2010 and 2018. So I presented those stats and I'll ask you to draw your own conclusions from those. So in 2019, our population was increasing. House prices were rising faster than inflation. That's another thing actually. If wages had been rising with inflation, the average Hastings resident should have been earning £23,000, as it was obviously not earning that. So it's a real-time wage cut. And our wages were rising by negative values in comparison. Homelessness was growing exponentially. So I've put these next slides up to show us a little bit more about perhaps what the macroeconomic, the massive economic factors or the slightly bigger economic factors might be that are driving this. And so basically these show you the Bank of England base rates. The top two show you two charts comparing the Bank of England base rate. And we can see that since the financial crisis around 2009, the Bank of England slashed base rates down to, what was it, about 1%, I think at the time, or no, less than that, 0.5%. And they've sat around that mark ever since. So I'm not going to suggest that everybody, it's quite a big thing to understand the Bank of England base rate, but effectively that affects the interest rate on your mortgage, as well as the interest rate on your banking. So before this, you could quite easily leave some money in a bank account and expect it to accrue quite a bit of interest. That's quite a bit, perhaps 6%, perhaps more than that if you go a little bit further back in time. And also mortgage rates. So the Bank of England base rate will affect mortgage rates. And you can see at the bottom there is a tracker of all the average mortgage rates through that time. And you can see that actually mortgage rates have been very, very low as well. Basically what this means is that since 2009, it has been very, very cheap to borrow money for property. At the same time, it has not really been worthwhile keeping your money in the bank. So what does this mean? It means that the only sensible investment for the average person who has anything more than about £5,000 is property. Because actually you've then got a solid capital asset, a house isn't going anywhere, and you can guarantee that it's going to go up. On that first slide, I showed you the increase in property prices between 2010 and 2018, and you can possibly remember that actually the average increase in property value was 5.8%. So if you had bought a house in 2010, you'd have been getting around 6% interest on that year on year. If you'd have stuck it in the bank, you'd have got nothing effectively, or very little, 1%, 2% perhaps. So yeah, you can kind of start to see how the picture's playing out there. Next one here is from the house price index. I've got to try and whip through these. I know I'm taking longer than I should have done already, but I do want to get these across. So here's a little snippet of the house price index. You can see in the top left hand there. That grey section is the period of time that Bank of England base rate has been at 1% or 0.5%. And you can see that actually Hackney, I've just listed a random London borough there that came to the top of my head. So we've got Hackney there, and you can see that actually in London boroughs, property prices have gone pretty ludicrous. Actually in Hastings, as much as it feels like we're having a super really bad time of things when it comes to property prices, or it feels like that for a lot of us, if you own a property, probably doesn't feel too much like that. You'll see that actually Hastings property prices have sort of tracked along at the same sort of rate of increase as the whole of England. Whereas a comparable town such as Hull has actually tracked a lot lower. So it's property prices in Hull have tracked a lot lower. So suggests that actually the problem might be existing in cities. It's not necessarily a Hastings problem here. It's actually cities are where the problem is really happening, and we're feeling the after effects, the reverb. I've included a screenshot of something that actually only came to my attention recently when a colleague of mine from Brighton, Dot, mentioned it to me about a company called Blackstone, a massive investment firm who've been buying up properties lock, stock and barrel in cities around the world. And the UN have actually accused them outright of contributing to the global housing crisis. It's not just Blackstone. There's lots and lots of massive investment funds that are in the process of buying up property all over the place in cities. And the knock-on effect is what's happening with us. So this is sort of bringing us more up to date. So I've given you lots of stats about what was happening in 2018, 2019. Obviously, since then, we've had the pandemic, which brings us to this Zoom call rather than a face-to-face down the pub. And I've got a chart at the top here. I know it's really tiny writing, so I'll just sort of explain it to you. It shows historic universal credit claimant counts in Hastings from 2013 up to October 2020. And you'll see that actually, it's got it dips in the middle and it starts to rise again. But then actually, towards the very end of that chart, there's a real sharp jump. And that was March, April of 2020. You can see that actually unemployment doubled across the town. So universal credit claims across the town doubled, and they've stayed that way ever since. HM Treasury publish reports each year on what they expect to happen in the economy each year, and they predicted that actually in this year, 2021, we can expect to see about another third increase in unemployment across the country. How that will play out locally, who knows, but it'll probably be around that, if not worse, because Hastings does tend to suffer more with this sort of a problem. And below that is a chart tracking the amount of evictions that happen each year in Hastings going back to 2003. So going back to 2003, historically, each year we have about 500 renters get evicted, and we can assume that's for various reasons. Whatever the reasons might be, for someone not being able to keep up on their rent. So we have about 500 people evicted, except for last year when actually only about 120 were evicted because there was an eviction freeze throughout that time. The eviction freeze was supposed to end, I think, at the beginning of this lockdown, but the government have extended it now till 21st of February. So we've got kind of a stay of execution for an awful lot of people. But what we can expect is in the next 3 to 6 months that actually we'll have quite a significant amount of new evictions. On top of that, this is just a quick screen grab from a Rightmove property update, which shows that actually in this year, in the middle of this year, Hastings had seen a massive uptick, 56% increase in buyer demand. And that makes us the most sort of sought after place in the south. And there's, it's got the new asking prices on the right hand side there, which actually aren't a massive jump from the previous slides, but are still probably out of the reach of the average person earning a local wage. So I'm just putting all of these stats out there, largely without too much comment, just for people to make their own minds up. I'm going to circulate these and I'll put these on the website. And I'm hoping these can just sort of inform us a little bit so that we're aware of some of the bigger forces that are at play, but also what the actual story is on the ground. So we can see homelessness, this was 2018, was on the increase. We can expect that there's probably going to be another quite a big round of homelessness as a result of the pandemic and the lockdowns. At the same time as we're seeing record levels of interest in the buyers market in Hastings. And I think that's pretty much all I've got. So.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Sam. Thank you for that. I think now we're going to have a video produced by Andrew Davies of Campaign Film, which, am I right? Yes, there we go.
My vision of Hastings would be that it would keep hold of its fantastic diversity of people and of income levels, rather than turn into a place that is only for certain types of people who can afford it.
My hope is that this town can continue to thrive in a way that enables a broad spectrum of people to live here and to continue living here, regardless of the kind of macroeconomic what else is going on. People who are in the position of being able to own property, or particularly more than one property, therefore then have the choice to make decisions about the influence that property ownership has on the community in which they're living.
A lot of the people, and I'm not going to say all, but a lot of the people who move here from London have more power than the local people. Hastings is still in the top 1% of most deprived communities in the UK. And so when you come to a town like Hastings and you see how cheap things are, it can seem like a great idea to go in, buy a property, do it up, and then charge as much money as possible for it.
So Hastings is changing, and for some people that means prosperity, but for other people they could be looking at the question of, where do I live? Part of the way our housing market works means that people have to work with agents who find all sorts of ways to exclude people who are a risk, and whether that's about their income, about their background. Those people don't even get a look in.
So I'm a private renter. I've lived here 7 years and the prices have just rocketed, as you all know. Certainly people like me have to find our own provision for the future.
As a new arrival to this town, I'm very conscious that I have contributed to the changes that are happening.
Most people who have moved here because there's something about the area that they like. They like the alternative lifestyle, they like the friendly people.
If you've only arrived in Hastings recently, then you won't yet have seen the fantastic festivals like Jack in the Green and the Old Town Carnival, the Pram Race. These are real examples that bring different people across Hastings together from all different backgrounds.
To me, changing Hastings is an opportunity for this group of people living in this place to take stock.
If you've moved to this town because you love it, then get involved with this project, because actually this is a great way for you to get to meet new people, but also to try and make sure that you can protect the things that brought you here.
Thank you for that. So Andrew Davies' film there, which again, thank you, Sam, gives you an idea of the situation in Hastings and what is faced by a number of people. And tonight, as I've said at the start, is all about trying to come up with solutions, digging into the problem, trying to come up with solutions to the issue that everyone is facing here. It's a wonderful town. Those of you that have moved here recently will be aware of that. Those of us who've been here a while already know that. It's a lovely town, and we want to keep it that way, and obviously engage with everyone in order to ensure that we can all participate and enjoy it. So that's what tonight is about. Now, let's go to our panel, because I've got a fantastic panel. We've got a fantastic panel on the show tonight who are going to dig into the witnesses and see if we can tease out some solutions. So on the panel tonight, we've got Claudine Eccleston, we've got Adam Clements, we've got Dr. Kirk, and we've got Dr. Susan Actimel. I don't know if we're able to see them on the screen, but I'll give you a little bit of background about the panelists very quickly. So Claudine moved to Hastings from London a few years back. Claudine's a homeowner and there she is. Hello, Claudine.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm absolutely fabulous.
You were the first ever registered female plumber in the United Kingdom, is that right?
Well, I'm not sure whether that's the case, but you know, they like a black face in the paper to show that racism is done. So in 1978, I was that black face.
Fantastic. And you were recently, I know, on Channel 4's Lodgers for Codgers.
Yes, indeed.
You're a codger, and
yeah, I'm a codger.
You're not. And you own a home here, and I think you've got a couple of properties here, and you're a private landlord as well, aren't you? That's
indeed, yes.
Claudine, stay with us. And then we've got Adam Clements. Adam, are you there? Adam, there he is.
I am here. Hi.
Adam, great to see you. Now, you've lived on and off in Hastings for the past 15 years. Is that about right?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah. I first came down here 2006.
Excellent. And you rent a flat, I think, in Rock House. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so Rock House is pretty amazing. It's owned by White Rock Neighbourhood Ventures, and the residential floors in Rock House are managed by Living Rents, which is a kind of socially conscious landlord. So I was lucky enough to get a flat here in 2016, and I've been here ever since. And to be honest, the thought of leaving, I dread the thought of leaving at any point, because as a socially conscious landlord, they kind of make me feel very secure, and my rents only rise with inflation and things like that. So
yeah, brilliant. So thank you. And I think also you are a passionate filmmaker, you're an animator, you've got an interest in positive social, environmental and community projects. Is that right? That's all those things?
That's right. Yeah. So I'm self-employed as a filmmaker, and I run a business which works just with non-profits and good causes, things like that. Yeah.
Great to have you on, Adam. We'll come back to you in a bit. And I think Dot Kirk, is Dot Kirk there? Hello, Dot. Lovely to see you. Now, you told me you're originally a northerner, but you're based in Brighton, and you're a community organizer, I think, training and working in the southeast, and you work for Brighton and Hove Community Land Trust. Is that right?
Yeah, so I'm also kind of an interloper to this area, and been kind of working along the south coast. I've done quite a bit of work in Hastings with Sam and Jess. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, it's great that you're on, and you can just tell us quickly. You've recently led the Push Back Brighton campaign, because you're based in Brighton now. Just tell us, like 15 seconds, the Push Back Brighton campaign. What is it?
So actually, I've got a picture here that I should be wielding. We've got mock estate agent boards across the city. That obviously is something that we could do during COVID times, where we can't get people to gather physically, but it's something that people can see around the streets. And it's called Push Back Brighton, and it's our response to people being pushed out of the city. And we're trying to start a conversation about that and why people are being pushed out, who's being pushed out, and what can we do to change that and to change the future of our city as well. So similar issues, all connected along the coast.
Thank you for being on the show tonight. And our final panelist tonight is Dr. Susan Achtemel. I'm hopeful that Dr. Achtemel is available to join us. Dr. Achtemel is the Executive Director of Homes for Good social business group. And she's made received countless achievements. I think Dr. Susan established a Scottish charity called Impact Arts, has received several awards for her work and commitment to social entrepreneurship. Now, you're based in Glasgow, Susan, that's right, isn't it? You set up Homes for Good in order to, in your words, change the private rented sector for people who need homes most. But you're a landlord, so can you tell me, just very briefly, tell us, what inspired you to set up Homes for Good?
There were two things that inspired me to set up Homes for Good. And before I start, I'm so pleased that you called me Dr. Achtemel, because nobody ever does. So I'm quite happy about that, Tim.
Okay. Thank you.
So there were two reasons I set up Homes for Good. The first one was, as a landlord, I am a private landlord. I have been for 20 years. And I wasn't happy with the quality of service that I was getting from the letting agents that I was working with. And so I went through a process of taking my properties back from letting agents. And when you go through that process, you then engage with your own tenants. And it was at that point that I saw that not only was I getting a poor service from the letting agents, my tenants were getting a dreadful service from the letting agent as well. So because of the background that I had in my day job in social change, I thought I'm going to bring them both together, and I'm going to create the housing business that I want to see and that I think people need. So it really came out of being a dissatisfied customer, but seeing that things could be different.
Excellent. Well, I love it. Thank you so much. And I think just very quickly, there was an article about you recently in, I think, The Guardian, and a line that really jumped out at me was the fact that as a private landlord, it was an eye-opener to you when you realized that one of your tenants, I think, was living in fear of eviction, even though there were no plans to evict. That's I think, how it was expressed in the article. So you bring up, as do all our panelists, you bring a brilliant perspective to tonight's show. Thank you very much. Right, thank you all. Now let's go, if we can, please, to our first witness tonight, who is Billy Darlington. Now, Billy is a musician. He's a drummer. And I think there he is. Thank you, Billy. Now, you first came to Hastings about 30 years ago. Is that right?
I came here 27 years ago. I came here for a long weekend and then stayed.
The very long weekend, Billy. Very long weekend. And it's still going on. And I think, Billy, am I right in saying that your housing situation changed dramatically about 5 years ago? Can you just?
Yes, about 5-6 years ago, I had a property, a flat in Hastings town centre. It came on the market. My landlord told me, and you had a few people around to look at it and that sort of thing. So I knew it was kind of temporary to some degree. And then about sort of a few months later, a couple came around and they ended up buying it for Airbnb, and they had about 4 or 5 properties darted around the south coast. And I had they told me there's no chance I'll be allowed to be there. Obviously, it's an Airbnb. So I was essentially booted out, So I mean, I knew I was going to be booted out anyway at some point, but it was I just had no future there. So so I was left to find something else.
Okay, and that was about 5 years ago.
Yeah, about that sort of, maybe a little bit longer, 5-6 years ago, something like that.
Okay, well, I'm gonna open you up to the panel now, but just before I do that, I've been given some questions in advance, and one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Billy, it's come from Kate Moran. Kate is a local St Leonard's resident. She rents in St Leonard's. She's the chair of Houch, which is Hastings Older Women Co-Housing Group. She describes herself as enthusiastic and passionately believes it's time to walk our talk with sustainable and affordable community-led housing. Now, Kate's question for you, Billy, is around mental health. And she says, a value should be put on well-being, and asks if you would agree, and how did your eviction impact you from a mental health perspective?
Well, it was very stressful, as it would be, for anyone to be, kind of not thrown out, but having to find somewhere else to live. It's very stressful, and I think around that time it's probably I got about a month or two's notice. I can't remember how long it was. There's a lot of stress involved in it, and I had to sofa surf. I was staying around. Luckily, in Hastings, it's got a big community, so luckily I had some friends. I wasn't homeless on the streets, homeless, but it wasn't far off of it.
Yeah.
And so I had the opportunity to stay at several friends' sofas. Went back to my mother's in Kent for a bit. And it was just a lot of stress, really. I had a hell of a lot of stress. It was just not easy finding. And also, not just that, it was a lot of places nowadays have 3 months deposit. So it's like, I don't know what it was like then. It probably wasn't as extreme as that. But even so, it's still hard to find a deposit. And the place I was in at the time was through a friend. So I didn't have a deposit there anyway. So I didn't have a deposit to move on. Do you understand what I'm saying? So yeah, it was a lot of stress, a lot of unnecessary stress,
Absolutely. Well, yeah. Can I now just ask the panel to come in? I was going to go to Adam, actually, just first of all. Adam, I don't know, as someone who's in a not dissimilar position to Billy, what would you like to ask Billy?
Well, I mean, I'd be interested to know what Billy, if Billy thinks there's any, who or what is at fault at the moment, and are there any kind of simple solutions? Because I think that's the thing. I think it's such a big topic, right? This whole housing crisis thing. So I want to know what would be what can be simply done.
Yeah, good question, Billy. What do you think?
What I would suggest is, the Airbnb thing something has to be done about that, because the couple that took on that property I was in, they were lovely people. But they had about 5 properties that they weren't resident in, so it was just essentially places that probably were just sort of in residence 3 months of the year. I used to walk past that place in the winter, and it was like, no one in it, and it was like, I was sitting there sort of freezing, not homeless, but freezing. Yeah. And, so maybe something to do with it, something's got to be done about that for sure. Yeah. A capping on some sort of rent has to be done for, depending on your income. I'm on benefits currently, so it's pretty hard for me. And also another thing, being on benefits, there's sort of we get kind of bad publicity from being on the dole at Universal Credit. It's really hard to find a property that accepts that. In fact, I've had to lie before, and that's not right. I shouldn't have to lie for my position. I'm not that stereotypical. There shouldn't be a stereotype on that anyway. You know what I mean?
No. It's Yeah, well, Billy, Dr. Susan, Dr. Actimel, can I bring you in? Partly because Billy mentioned Airbnb there, and obviously the system I know is different in Scotland to here, but I didn't know if you wanted to pick up on any of the points that Billy's made, whether Airbnb or any of the other points.
Yeah, I think the first thing, that Airbnb is a universal problem across the country, and I think that we are fortunate in Scotland that our government has. The Scottish government and certainly in Edinburgh City Council and Glasgow City Council have been very proactive in trying to minimise and control and legislate and regulate what's going on in Airbnb, and there has absolutely been a displacement of full-time residential homes for people into this Airbnb sort of grey area, and I think it's heartbreaking that Billy says he walks past he walks past the property and it's lying empty. That just sums up for me exactly what's wrong with all of this. So I think that you know, as Billy's mentioned, the local government and potentially national or regional government has to do something to regulate against excessive Airbnb and exploitation of residential homes for a profit margin, basically. And I think, you know, it's a much wider thing that Billy's raised, but this idea of that letting agents or landlords won't accept people on universal credit and receipt of benefits. I'm very keen to understand a lot more about what is actually happening in Hastings around that, because from a very quick look at the rental market and the property market, and it's a very quick look that I've had, it doesn't seem to be that there's such a divergence, or there shouldn't be such a divergence between benefit rates and market rent. So if there is active discrimination going on, then how can we change that, and how can we tackle that?
Thank you very much, Dr. Billy.
I totally understand that. I mean, that's, you know, it's a crazy world we live in, but it's there's been a lot of discrimination, and it's really sad. You know, there's a lot of individuals. Luckily for me, I have a lot of friends around me in Hastings or wherever that have looked after me. You know, and I feel for the people that don't have that, you know, family or friends that happen to be homeless on the streets. You know, luckily I haven't been, but you know, I was that close to being that person. You know, so I feel for people like that. So you know, it's just something that has to be done. Discrimination, I don't understand. It's always been pretty much like that. You know, I have a disability, and it's hard for me to get any landlords to understand that. You know, it's not impossible, really. Like I say, I've had to lie. I don't want to lie. You know, it's sort of.
Yeah. No, thank you, Billy. Billy, there's been some questions coming into the chat. I haven't spotted them, but I'm wondering, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm wondering if Quiva O'Gorman from Changing Hastings wanted to come in at this point and put one or two of those questions to you. Yeah. Hi, Quiva. Can you?
Hi, Tim. Yeah, we've had loads of really interesting comments and questions, actually. Yeah, so some people are coming in with possible solutions straight off the bat. Nick Perry says, there used to be a Hastings charitable trust called, I think, the Bond Board, which provided, among other things, deposits for rented accommodation. Could private landlords contribute to funding something like this again on a voluntary basis, or be linked to council's landlord registration fee as a percentage? And we also have this idea from Mary's, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Could the council use a lot of the buildings that aren't in use to be carefully and sustainably turned into housing for locals born or brought up as a child within 5 miles of the building's area, for example, so that those from Hastings could afford somewhere decent to live, with there being a lot of seasonal and part-time jobs? And then Sophie Bell mentions the threat of eviction, and I know Sam mentioned there was an evictions freeze, there still is at the moment, but Sophie says, with regard to the threat of eviction hanging over people's heads after the ban ends, what sort of support and advice is available? I'm concerned that whilst there may be many ways in which these could be challenged, but people might not know where to turn.
Brilliant, thank you, Quiva. Can we go to Dot Kirk from Brighton, and I just wonder, Dot, do you have a question for Billy just before we move on?
Yeah, I'm just interested in hearing a bit more about, like, what would your kind of ideal situation be? Like, what would it give you, having that more stable housing available to you? What would it look like? What would it give you?
Well, it give me, you know, I'd have a sense of stability. I mean, you know, obviously, you know, it's living sofa surfing. I don't know if any of you guys have ever done it. It's not fun. You know, it's sort of very nice to have friends that will do that for you and that kind of thing, but you never really feel at home. You always feel in the way of people. It doesn't matter how friendly they are, how close they are. It's a pain, you know. And it's also you're living out of a bag, which isn't cool. So what it gives to me was stability, you know, and independence, you know. It's just the sort of obvious, no, you know, just respect to you if your question is a very valid question, but it's just stability and, you know, not having to be worried about where I'm going to be tomorrow, you know. I mean, at the moment, I'm renting a room in Hastings at the moment. I'm actually currently in Kent at the moment because of lockdown procedures at the moment, close to my mother and stuff. So that's out of my hands. But I do have a place in Hastings. I'm currently looking for somewhere at the moment. So if anyone knows anyone, you know, please get in contact. But yeah, it's just stability. It's just, you know how it is. I don't know if you have your own property. I don't know. You live in what your situation is. It's just the stability and independence and the things that you have. You know, you have your own cupboard of food and stuff, and you know.
And
but it's a good question.
Yeah, thank you. And Billy, as Kate identified at the start, the impact on mental health for the course, which then that goes to the point that Dot made in terms of what it would look like for you having a more stable situation than the one that you currently find yourself in. Thank you so much, Billy. Billy Darlington there, who was our first witness, and thank you to our panel members. We will meet them all again shortly. We'll be coming back to see them and to hear their questions to our next witness, who I will tell you about in just a minute. But before we do that, I want to bring in, if I can, Lucas Howard, Lucas the Peaceful Poet. That's how I had him billed here. Is Lucas available?
Hi.
Hello, Lucas, welcome. Now you're the Peaceful Poet, aren't you? That's right?
I try my best to be, yes.
Excellent, I love it. And you're going to give us some performance poetry, I know, in just a minute, and it's going to be Hastings linked. So I'm very excited. I'm really thrilled that you're going to do that for us, and we're going to hear your poem, which I think is about Hastings. I won't give it away. But just before I do that, when we spoke before, I think I'm right in saying that you've been living in Hastings for around 7 years. And you found yourself quite a landlord. So in just about 60 seconds, can you tell us what your situation is from a housing perspective?
Yeah, sure. I've had the same landlord since I've been in Hastings, and he should be tuning in today, actually. So hopefully he's hearing this. But it's a really good story because he's very social minded. A lot of gigs that I go to, poetry gigs, music gigs, I've seen him in and around Hastings, part of the community. He's also been very active in social issues. I've seen him in protests and things like that. And I just really feel like he's had my back and my partner's back right from the beginning. He hasn't boosted rent as he could have done. And I'm living in this flat now, which is the best home I've ever lived in. It's my ideal home. And I would imagine, I'm not very, I don't really look at the prices or anything, but I would imagine that he could ask a lot more for it. He hasn't, which I am eternally grateful for that. And I feel like if he wasn't such a good landlord and we didn't have good landlords like this in Hastings, then I wouldn't be able to afford to live here because I'm on low wage. I'm a poor creative. And it's because of people like my landlord that I can actually stay in Hastings. So I'm really, really grateful for that.
So your landlord has effectively self-capped your rent, if you like. I don't know if self-capping is it. He's voluntarily regulated his own rent to make it affordable for you.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Okay.
When we have problems with anything that needs fixing, it's always fixed within a week or 2 weeks. And he's always very nice on the phone, very friendly, and just very forthcoming. Absolute legend.
Sounds like a great guy. Right. Well, Lucas, I'm going to now invite you to please give us your poem.
Brilliant. Tongue in cheek. So I'm just putting that as a sort of, way that this is called Haytown. I'm a wasteling of Hastings, knees up, I'm so sober. G's front on the seafront as I sleep on my sofa. Bohemia Road, man, there's no hope without desire. There's no crow without smoke, then so come stoke with a slow poke. Oh no, so tall, top of this dead island shitless. The hardest place in the southeast to ever find a witness. Eyes turn to sea walls, they see all and say nothing. A town full of mimes and blind man's bluffing. Coked up little coastal town where seagulls rule the streets. Trying to eat something, but there's fuck all here to eat. It's tantamount to murder. The gentry will survive, half man, half burger as they eat themselves alive. Chip shops, bus stops, mug shops. Hordes of Hoxton hipsters hopping a train down for the day. They found a playground of 1,000 lost wallets as pickpockets and change hounds all profit down in Haytown. Weighed down by life, take you way down to Haytown. Prices and night they way down in Haytown. You followed the lure like you're like a greyhound. Now your types live your lives caught way down in Haytown. We've got fake shakes and fist bumps. We've got Mayday lip blunts. We got yoga-based day raves with middle-aged rich mums, no pills in their systems, bliss through persistence while dissident miscreants get pissed in the distance. Listen, I'm shunned by high society. All said and done, pissheads are polite to me. So much liquor left on their breath, yes, I believe bonfire societies hire them to fire breathe. Light of human meth send my kind of insobriety. Blessed with the best cess, I find higher breeds, Calibags, scallywag black, the swaggest types of weed. Stops me getting aggy and relaxed to be a nicer me. I'm climbing shiny hills on psilocybin pills. My mind is free to slide inside itself and then unwind itself entirely. Nice bit of buff bud to puff on the way down. That's 2 hits. I'm double Dutch, so much love for Haytown. Way down by life, make your way down to Haytown. You can dress how you like, mate. It's okay down in Haytown. It's getting quite late, son. You ain't making the train now. You may have to stay one more day down in Haytown. Thank you.
Lucas Howard, the peaceful poet there. Thank you so much, Lucas. Well done. Lovely, brilliant. And I'm sure that when we're all locked out and set free again, you're going to be performing for us all to see. So thank you, Lucas. Right, now, what I want to do, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be able to bring into this conversation the wonderful Jess Steele. Now, many of you will know Jess, as Jess has been involved in community-led regeneration in Hastings since 2006. She played a key role in the rescue of Hastings Pier. Since 2013, she's focused on tackling dereliction in the wider White Rock neighborhood, particularly the relics of the Hastings Observer newspaper empire. She was a founder trustee of the Heart of Hastings Community Land Trust, remains their professional advisor, and in 2016, she was awarded an OBE for services to community assets in the UK. And Jess, I think you may, well, you're going to feed into this conversation type, which is brilliant. And there may be some solutions that you might sort of fire off. But over to you, Jess.
I'm going to speak really briefly. Thank you for that opportunity. What I'm going to talk about are not immediate solutions. It's not a replacement for political change or for direct action to support people who are suffering right now and will be very soon. But I wanted to let everyone know about a long-term homegrown process that's already underway very much in the town. So a group of interconnected organisations have been creating what we're now calling the Hastings Commons. We started back in 2014 buying a disused office block on Cambridge Road, that's now Rock House, with 6 homes, as Adam mentioned, plus more than 40 workspaces. All of them, homes and workspace, capped rents. So that means they go up with inflation, but never go up more than that. And the housing is at living rents, which is set at 1/3 of average local incomes. So since then, we've converted other properties into 4 more homes, affordable workspace, and quite soon a workshop and classroom space, and a shop and some caves. So we've been taking what there is in Hastings and trying to make good stuff with it. We've bought and begun to renovate the Observer building, which will have 15 more affordable homes, more workspace, a lot of room for leisure and learning and community action. And we want to keep growing with this mixed use approach that's rooted in Hastings and in these underlying values. So that's living rents and capped rents, but it's also more than that. It's kind of community building, community self-management, which is also known as commoning. We make these places together. So it's not just about solving housing need, it's also about building neighbourliness and contributing to the wider community. So the Community Land Trust, Heart of Hastings, is a particular kind of organisation. It's called a Community Benefit Society, and that means it's owned by community shareholders. So you can buy shares from £25, you become a member. It's 1 member, 1 vote, so everyone has equal influence if they choose. People who volunteer over time can be granted shares for free. Heart of Hastings also runs something called the Investors Collective, for those people who've got more funds. So investors there put in between £5,000 and £100,000. 90% of that is a loan. It's repayable after 3, 4 or 5 years. It gets between 3 and 4% interest each year, so much better than the bank. The other 10% stays in the community land trust as shares, so you continue to have a stake. And I'd say that offers an option to offset the impact of moving here in a way that builds community and retains diversity and keeps the place we all fell in love with. So I'm saying you can invest in community-led housing in your hometown, either with money or by getting involved, or both. It's already happening and it can grow. Back in 2014, I was remortgaging my house because the mortgage had come to an end. I decided to take more than I needed so that I could invest directly into making Rock House possible. I'm not suggesting you all do something like that, but if you've had a windfall from the craziness of the property market and you've built up unearned equity like I had, why not put a bit back in? And that way we can make sure there will always be affordable places to live and work in Hastings.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jess. That is what a message, and I think that goes to the very heart of what Changing Hastings is about, which is this is about looking at solutions to what we're faced with from a community-led perspective. It's what it's really what works best when we all get together and do things. We work collectively so well. So, Jess, thank you so much. Now, what I want to do is move on to our second witness of the evening. It's none other than Andy Battsford. Now, Andy Battsford, some of you may know, Andy is the local Labour councillor for St Helens Ward. He has been since 2012. And he also, hello Andy, he also, you're responsible for you have the housing portfolio for Hastings Borough Council. And I will say quickly, that you were born in Hastings, you've lived here your whole adult life. You were the manager of Extracts Young People's Charity for about 17 years, working at the sharp end of young people's housing and homelessness. And you now work full time with children in care and unaccompanied young asylum seekers. And you're passionate about housing and council-led housing developments and Hastings' response to homelessness and rough sleeping. Andy, thank you so much for being with us. Can I ask you, very briefly, to give us your view of the local housing situation here in Hastings?
Yeah, nice one, Tim, and thank you to all the other people that have contributed so far. In fact, I was pleasure to have that. Saw that poem being recited at one of the poem jams last year at the Print House, and it was excellent then. It was excellent then as well. So thank you for that. So I am really privileged to be the portfolio holder for housing in Hastings Borough Council, because ultimately housing is the biggest priority that I think affects everybody in Hastings. I mean, Hastings is a town of renters. You know, disproportionately, we are 50% more people. 50% of all people that live in Hastings rent property, which is much higher than the rest of the country normally. So the cut and thrust of the rental market really impacts on the people of Hastings quite dramatically, in fact, actually. And so, I've been a renter pretty much all my life, and I have the pleasure of trying to search out properties and see the prices going up through the roof every year. I mean, just in context, back to what Sam was talking about. I mean, we've seen a 40% increase in 2-bedroom flat prices in the last 3 or 4 years, which is exponential rise, and as we've seen, the wages just are not keeping up with that at all. In fact, Hastings was sort of well known as a cheap place to rent many years ago. We had local authorities, local authorities sort of placing young people here and homeless people here because it was cheaper to do that. And but we, back in the day when I was working through Extracts, we could find somewhere for a young person to live, a studio flat or 1-bedroom flat, and it would fit pretty much within the sort of LHA housing benefit rates. And, we were comfortable that a young person could actually afford that. But those days are long gone. LHA rate that the government give through the universal credits and whatever are absolutely woeful to the actual cost of living in Hastings now. So, that's the massive problem we have in Hastings now, is that people are coming to the council saying that they're a threat of being homeless or they are homeless. we can, if they fit the criteria, because we, ultimately we're sort of linked with the criteria because that's how we get paid by central government and through the LHA rate. But it's finding them somewhere sustainable to live after we place them in temporary accommodation. I mean, at the moment we've got around about 266 units already being used for temporary accommodation, and 60% of those are actually being used by single or couples. And they are so hard to find somewhere sustainable to live afterwards. So our officers spend a huge amount of time working with officers and officers that work with the local letting agencies and to try and find sustainable accommodation for them. We've just spent nearly £5 million in the last year buying accommodation to actually put people in temporary accommodation for ourselves to try and keep the costs down. This year, the council's facing a £2 million budget cost for temporary accommodation, which is huge. Which is, you can imagine with the cuts that are coming into the local authority, £2 million is a huge amount of money to find to actually make sure. But it's the right thing to do. I mean, we've got 52 rough sleepers now housed during COVID, which was amazing, and with that wraparound support for mental health nurses and housing practitioners. But that stuff costs money, and we've managed to get money down from government at the moment, but obviously sustainably into the future, that's going to be a real challenge as well. And just a couple of other facts and figures really, that currently on our housing list, we've got around about 1,666 families waiting for a property. On average, 2 a month come up for bidding. So, you can see the massive disparity between the amount of people we've got waiting on the waiting list and the amount of properties that are coming through the housing associations that obviously the allocations work through at the moment. So as a council and as a lead cabinet member for that, we are absolutely passionate about building new homes for local people. And when I talk about homes, I'm talking about LHA rate homes, because I do believe that stability, as Billy was talking about, stability is the key. A family that has got a home that they know that they can depend on, that they're not at risk of losing, even if they lose their job. And with furlough coming to an end, as Sam pointed out, the risk of people becoming homeless is going to be huge, and we're very acute to that, and we're already putting things in place to try and make sure that there are not only partners in place to actually help those people when they find themselves in difficult situations, but our officers are waiting as well. So it's a huge portfolio. Massive potential, though. We are really committed to addressing this issue, but it takes time. It takes huge amounts of money. Developing a housing estate is £25 million plus. That's no mean undertaking and a borrowing for the council to do.
Andy, that's brilliant. Sorry, I just wanted to because what I want to do is open. That's excellent. I want to open up some questions now for you. Can I go to Claudine Eccleston, because I know that Claudine was introduced earlier. Claudine's a local private landlord. Claudine, do you have any questions? Do you have a question for Andy as a landlord? Is there anything more that you consider that the council could or should be doing to perhaps to control some landlords, not you as a landlord, because I know that your stance as a landlord, Claudine, is highly moral. But Claudine, are you there?
I am here.
There you are. Claudine, question for Andy.
I'm still a little bit wound up about and no disrespect for people who do Airbnb in flats, but it's their choice. I'm a bit wound up about why landlords have to go through licensing, which provides a minimum level of safety for people, and people who do Airbnb do not. So if a fire breaks out above you and you're living in the flat below or above, you don't even know who's there, if they're there, whether you should help them. You don't have the same relationships. I think that there's more to Airbnb than just a replacement for hotels and bed and breakfast. Are there any plans to curtail this?
Well, yeah, thank you, Claudine. Great question, Andy. Licensing.
It's a really good question, and the question about safety is one of the main highlights that our officers' concerns, really, because obviously as you quite rightly say, if you're on a B&B, if you own a flat, you have to work through some very, very strong, quite rightly, strong fire and health and safety aspects to make sure that you are fit and proper. Whereas an Airbnb does not have to comply to that. And we are really aware of those issues. With Airbnb, I mean, as a borough council, we have limited powers, and I think, what we've done and officers do on a regular basis is lobby government about this, because, we are rightfully concerned about the safety concerns, but also the impact of Airbnb, the slow creep effect on Hastings as well. So, in fact, only on Monday did my officers and myself have a meeting with a local letting agency owner who had a really good idea, actually, how we could actually address some of the issues of an Airbnb, and that is through the freehold of some of the bigger blocks especially in St Leonard's, where Airbnbs are popping up within those blocks. And the idea is basically that the freeholder has some sort of sway who takes on those properties. So we're exploring some way of how we can locally tweak it a bit by encouraging freeholders and landlords of big blocks to actually put it in their licensing bits and pieces, and maybe in their covenants about Airbnbs or second properties. So you can have some sort of level of control there. But it's interesting to hear the doctor earlier talking about Edinburgh and Scotland putting some legislation in place. I've read through bits and pieces, and I'd be really interested to read again, but my understanding is that they're still waiting for national legislation as well to really make an impact on Airbnb.
Could we bring then Dr. Akhtamal in? Is that possible? Dr. Akhtamal, if you're there, do you have a question for Andy, whether picking up on that Airbnb point or just broader to the work that you do?
Yeah, and first of all, you don't have to call me doctor anymore. Okay. I'm quite happy to soon. Although I'm very happy. I'm going to tell everyone tomorrow that that's what's happening. So, first of all, Andy, just to go back to your point about legislation, we're actually quite lucky in Scotland because we are very close to central government, and central government is driving the consultation, and there will be a bill going through government about Airbnb, and the housing minister has said that the pandemic is not reason enough to stop that legislation going through. So there is absolutely a push from central that is backed up and supplemented by local authorities, and I'd be really happy to share with you, all the documentation for you to have a look at it. Going back to Andy's points about the housing issues that you have, and the use of temporary accommodation and the costs of it, the problems that you're facing are not really that dissimilar from what's going on in Glasgow, I have to say. I'm surprised at the number of similarities. Now, from my perspective, what's good about that is that means that there are parallels that we can learn from each other and apply quite well. And I think the thing I would say to Andy, and this is with my sort of maverick, not liking authority type hat on, you've got a budget of £2 million to spend on temporary accommodation. What could you do with that budget differently? Having people in temporary accommodation doesn't provide the stability, and I think it was what Billy was saying earlier, and somebody asked, I think it was Dot that asked, what difference would having a home make? It is everything to have a home. Stability is the minimum that we need to have in our lives. It's just the basic fundamentals. So I think, Andy, my challenge to you would be, given that you have the power, given that you have the political power, is there a way that you could try some creative use of that budget to try and come up with solutions that plug the gap between LHA and market rents, or work collaboratively with private landlords to try and just break this jam and reduce the reliance on temporary accommodation?
Thanks, Susan.
It's a really good question, and I just want to sort of clarify that the £2 million we are spending on temporary accommodation is not a budget of £2 million. I assure you, if we could get away with not spending that, we would be spending on other things and other incentives. So it just happens that is going to be, that's the predicted budget for this year, because of all the things that we've spoken about before. Because the council's not immune to landlords enjoying to take a large rent from us as well. So and obviously because it's an emergency and we're looking for emergency accommodation, they would take full advantage of that as well. So I just want to limit it. We haven't got a £2 million budget that we spend on housing. It just happens that that has actually ended up, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, new and innovative ways of actually working and actually finding homes for people, stable homes is the most important thing. But we do have to react to people's situations at that moment in time as well. I mean, we do have a social letting scheme as well. So we do encourage landlords, normally accidental landlords, the ones that sort of like maybe have inherited a property or something like that. They offer that to the council. It's guaranteed rent for 3 years, you know, all the things that incentivize people to offer the accommodation to us, which then allows us to use that accommodation for our residents as well. So yeah, we're always sort of trying to look at ways of how to take those people out of the very precarious and expensive temporary accommodation into much more stable one. But it's the affordability at the end of it, because obviously we setting people up to fail is the issue. You know, if we find somewhere for them to stay, I mean, yeah, just in my example, yeah, I live in a 3-bedroom house. It's costing me £975 a month to rent. You know, it's huge amounts, much more than most people's mortgages every month. But because I've been renting for 20 years, I've got no way of actually saving up to actually find somewhere stable for my family to live. So you sort of get stuck in that trap. So it's really important that, one, we give people housing when it's needed, but also that stability at the end of it is really difficult. And say, yeah, the normal old-fashioned route would be to sort of put them on the housing register. They would bid and they would find somewhere secure for registered housing. But obviously, as we've spoken before, that just isn't happening at the moment. That's where it's broken.
Yeah, Andy, I want to stay with Andy if we can for a second, and I want to go to Dot. But before I go to Dot, because I want Dot to sort of raise some issues of community-led housing with you, Andy. But before we do that, Quiver, if you're there, Quiver, can we have some questions from the audience for Andy? Over to you, Quiver.
Great, yeah. There was a comment from Dot in the chat as well, just saying, I think it's easy to forget how instability affects everything we do and limits our potential, which is so true. Yeah. But we've had a lot of really constructive comments and questions in the chat today. People eager to work together to create a new bond board, as the last question mentioned. There are also comments, so one from Polly saying, is there a demand for a rental agency that specialises in more ethical practices? And Polly did have to leave Hastings for work a few years ago and rented her house. She would have used an agency that she knew would treat tenants well and not discriminate against people, etc. And then we have also got a comment from Deborah Nelson about Airbnb and a possible solution. So at the last meeting, the last Changing Hastings meeting, there was discussion about limiting Airbnb to staying in people's homes and not the full flats or full blocks of flats. And then Ursula McLaughlin has mentioned that she's interested in looking into a Hastings version of Fairbnb, taking a cut for the community from booking. And she says, give me a shout if you want to chat about the possibility. I can see people are already taking on that. And then a final question here. This is a concern. Omar says, what will happen if the pipe dream high-speed rail breaks ground in 2024? Will that affect the housing market? DFLs living in Hastings working to save money? Or could it open up opportunities for local residents in regards to job opportunities? Is this still a possibility?
Interesting. Well, brilliant. Some brilliant comments, some useful questions as well. So, Andy, just before we let you go, I wanted to bring Dot Kurt back in if I could, because Dot's involved, as I mentioned, and as she mentioned, in a community-led housing project in Brighton and Hove. Dot, over to you in terms of a question for Andy.
Yeah, I'm interested in how much, so community-led housing is, it's been mentioned a bit before by Jess, by Houch at the beginning, looking at co-housing where people have their own kind of front doors, but a lot of shared space and shared resources. So I'm interested in how you work with communities to create their own housing, community-led housing, and that kind of model not only creates housing and affordable housing and often way more sustainable housing, but it also gives community control over whether the housing gets sold off or the housing not being sold off for profit in the future. We've got a number of groups, and we're working quite closely with the council here in Brighton to look at pieces of land where we can create affordable community-led housing for people on low incomes. And I feel like that puts the ball back in people's court to create the right kind of living situation, tenancy situation, etc., for themselves, and to be their own landlords. Do you, like, so how, yeah, what do you think could happen in Hastings to create more community-led housing and give people more control over their own housing, and potentially create more community-led solutions?
No, thanks for that, Dot. In fact, I watch. I'm friends on Facebook with the Brighton Housing Cooperative. I've been watching with quite interest about the some of the schemes that they're bringing forward as well. I mean, I'm a product of a housing co-op. When I my first rented accommodation in Hastings was actually First Step Housing Cooperative, which was formed by groups of young people that couldn't find rented accommodation even back then, back in the day. And we actually took on some of the accommodation that the council had spare at the time. And we sort of like rented it off them and stuff like that. So we ended up with about 7 properties across Hastings at the time. So that was it's very much part of my DNA about housing. I've had meetings with the local housing co-ops in Hastings, and really trying to work out how we can, as a council, encourage and nurture more co-ops in Hastings. I think living in a house with other people and sharing a common sort of identity is really a strong way of living, and would sort out a lot of people's living situations. I mean, the council has actually worked quite closely with Jess and the gang with Rock House and the Observer Building and with Cambridge Road, and also with Howich as well. The office has been working very closely with them as well. So whenever a group of people come forward and are looking for support and help around it, then we'll always step forward and do our best to actually make sure that that they get all the support and advice that we can offer them through the offices as well. So it's an open door in some particular way as well. And but at the same time, you're quite right. It's got to be from the bottom upwards. We're there waiting, and we contribute some money to the regional group that actually sort of encourages people to set up community-led housing groups and stuff like that. I suppose my main concern is about how you grab the people that really affected by the homelessness issue, and how you drive and how you empower them to be part of that process. Because that's the people that we really want to help, giving them the skills, the time, the ability to actually drive those projects forward. But so absolutely, we are 100% committed to actually helping those people, and we've shown that through the groups that we've worked with in the past as well.
Brilliant. Well, that is great to hear. Thank you so much, Andy. Andy, if you could just stay with us to the end of the show, that would be great. What I want to do now, I want to get back to some audience questions in a minute. But before I do that, we're going to have another quick break, a sort of 3-minute music break this time. We have got the local Hastings band Buddha Triangle lined up, or at least Sam from Buddha Triangle, who is going to, I hope he's going to be there, and he's going to play a song entitled, I believe, Gentrification. Sam from Buddha Triangle, are you there? I'm crossing my fingers. I'm hoping this is going to work. Let's see if we can bring Sam in. If we can't, Sam.
Hello? Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, good, sweet.
Excellent. Song on gentrification.
Yeah, here we go.
Take it away.
Sound all right? Yo, I spent £4 on a soya cappuccino. It left me feeling sore like a chief in Chappuccino. They don't serve water, only San Pellegrino. Tiny can of craft beer, organic glass of vino. We know that you know you're mugging us up. I can tell by the way you're smirking through your curly moustache. It's bringing me my burger swerved up in a flat cap. Business taking selfies just to add them to his Snapchat. Fuck that, round the back, I'm raiding your big bag. All the pounds, a multi-pack of scampy flavour knickknacks. Get my pack of Tic Tacs to freshen my breath. Place up the test, Swedish local used to be the best. We used to feel blessed with cheap beer and good vibes. But there were not just bankers pouring £9 pints. The end of the night, my heart stops, I stand still. I need a longer loan just to pay for the bill. Something's going on in this town. All the cool bars are closed. closing down. Poor suffer from the rise of inflation. Rich are getting richer from this gentrification. Something's going on in this town. All the good bars are closing down. Poor suffer from the rise of inflation. Rich are getting richer from this gentrification. Turn the local boozer down the road into a Tesco. Let people in the car park eating sandwiches al fresco. People on the street now, they're losing their mind. Mikey made some moonshine and turned the whole town blind. Bars are so hard to find that Mikey made one in the garage. Thinking late at night, it's putting stress upon his marriage. Mikey's wife is like, leave, now we're back on the streets. Oh, when you got cheese and charcuterie meats. Something's going on in this town. All the good bars are closing down. Poor suffer from the rise of inflation. Rich are getting richer from this gentrification. Something's going on in this town. All the good bars are closing down. Poor suffer from the rise of inflation. Rich are getting richer from this gentrification. Remember the days of cheap bars, a great splitter, but the price of booze have risen, but the quality is shit. Sure, the bartenders are fitter, but they're lacking personality. Comments that they're giving is just boosting up their vanity. Can push girls like that to insanity. Ask her for a drink, you know she answers so pedantically. We don't serve that in a pub, we only serve it in a store. Yo, fuck that shit, man. I'll go down to another random boozer. Something's going on in this town. All the good bars are closing down. Poor suffer from the rise of inflation. Rich are getting richer from this gentrification. Something's going on in this town. All the good bars are closing down. Poor suffer from the rise of inflation. The rich are getting richer from this gentrification. I said the rich are getting richer from this gentrification. I said the rich are getting richer from this gentrification. I said the rich are getting richer from this gentrification. Poor suffer from the rise of inflation. Rich are getting richer from this gentrification. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
That's all, gang.
Yeah, brilliant. Sam there from Buddha Triangle and gentrification. Thank you, Sam.
Thanks
Good
a lot.
stuff.
Take care. All right, bye.
Nice to see you. Right, now, before we go back to get involved in another panel discussion, loads of questions coming in, and I want to get some more questions to our panelists and our witnesses. I want to just try something now. I'm hoping that Steve the Squeeze, because we've got a solution, a possible solution, and that's what we're into tonight, is if we can tease out some solutions. Steve the Squeeze, are you there?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you, but that doesn't matter.
Fantastic.
Excellent. Steve, tell us about your possible solution.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to have some more questions first, but all right, I'm ready. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on. And I'd just like to say what a great forum this has been. And thanks to Tim and Sam and Dan and anybody else. I'm sorry if I don't know anybody else, but it's been a great evening and some fantastic ideas. All whether it's a solution, I don't know. My idea, I'm lucky enough to be a property owner. And my plan is to, when I depart this earth, is to leave my property as some form of social housing, either as a cooperative or a charity. We don't know yet. For whose benefit? I'm not sure what type of persons might be beneficiaries, or even if one should prescribe a type at all. But I guess that there might be a general consensus that some people are more in need of cheap or free housing than others. So that's my plan, and that's been sort of brewing in my head over the last couple of years, I suppose. And I wondered if there's anybody else out there, either locally or nationwide, who might be interested in doing a similar thing with their property. And I've been pleasantly surprised by the expressions of interest from just a few friends whom I've mentioned it in passing. Maybe this idea could be part of a national movement. I don't know. I don't have in mind some sort of mega housing association like Orbit or those ones who really just sort of normal, end up as normal landlords. But maybe I have in mind some sort of umbrella organisation that maybe gives people advice and guidance on how to gift their property into the community. And if when other property owners are interested and may come on board, maybe their property gift could reflect their own personal choices. They might want to leave their property for the use of, I don't know, local young people or the homeless or asylum seekers. It's all very open at the moment. I suspect that. Hello?
No, Steve. I was just going to say. I mean, it's a fabulous idea, and love it. I'm guessing you don't have kids. Is that?
Well, that's you almost read my mind there. I suspect that this idea will get much more take up from people who, like myself and like you have identified, have no kids or close relatives, and the relatives and kids who might be relying on a nice inheritance. But there are quite a few of us, and I think it's a sort of a demographic that's growing as well.
Brilliant, Steve. That is, I mean, it's such a good idea. It's creative and love it. I can see there's a comment from Dot there. Could maybe Houch, the Hastings Older Women's Cooperative, have access? So those sorts of things. Great idea. Thank you so much, Steve. That's legendary. Steve the Squeeze, Steve Accordion from Hastings there with a genius plan, hopefully a solution that will be kicked around as a possible to take forward. Now, we've got about 12 minutes left. There was a change tonight, just a last minute change to our plan witnesses. So I want to bring in, if I can, Claudine Eccleston, bring back in Claudine Eccleston. But also, if I can just say to the other panel members and Andy Battsford and Billy Darlington, if he's there, that we've got about sort of 10, 12 minutes, and the audience to kick this around. So please stand by your buttons and be ready to come in. Claudine, lovely.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you? Still good. Excellent. Claudine, just thinking about it, just forget the being a witness thing. I'm just thinking about it sort of more creatively. What's been your sort of thoughts from tonight? What sort of struck you out of what some of the speakers have said, some of the people have said? Anything that springs to mind that you'd like to see? Anything at all? What's your view?
There's been some really, really, really good participation, some comments, and some insight as well. I mean, those shocking statistics of the size of the housing waiting list is just beyond belief. It's just ridiculous. I also, having been in Hastings for 8.5 years, I had no idea that Jess about an investors collective, because me and my husband, we've continued to explore social enterprise routes to housing. The properties we own basically are, I think they're all families, and they're not going anywhere. So we're quite happy with that. One thing that did occur to me was the underuse and I feel very sort of unproductive nature of how my council tax is spent, because the council does have a lot of it would appear commercial properties that are empty, and I'm just wondering whether there's any kind of even good business sense in that, and whether or not the council might not look at switching some of those, maybe disposing of those in favour of the ability to purchase or develop more properties for social housing. But also commercial properties are also important, because Hastings not just has a big tenant population, but a very large self-employed population who benefit from those projects, like what is going on at Rock House, and live work units. People need studios, people need all sorts of stuff. And yeah,
that's a great idea. Just I want to pick up on that the use of commercial properties there. And I know, Andy, if we could bring Andy Battsford back in. Andy, I know that commercial housing isn't particularly your thing, but picking up on Claudine's point there, and a point I think that I saw in the comments as well. Are there any plans in terms of the usage of commercial property, particularly with the ability for more and more people to work from home?
Can I just say that every month I look on the council website, and there's always commercial properties to lease or stuff. those obviously are not appropriate for housing, but there are other commercial properties, and those that are there that seem to have a very high vacancy rate on, like, is it Castleham Estate and stuff. Can't you just sell the bloody things and just use the money to house people?
Well, there you go, Andy.
Shall I come in there? I'd say, obviously,
thanks, Claudine.
There are really a massive range of different solutions to the housing crisis. It's like a spice rack, isn't it? You can sort of take a different one and sort of like it might apply to a different demographic in the town. I mean, commercial properties, especially the redesign of the town centre. You're absolutely right. COVID sort of like super speeded the change in our town centres, and we're already working on projects to look at how we can actually make sure that more people will come in and live in the town centre, make it more vibrant and living at all times. I think that's really, really important. So it's but the amount of, I'm not really sure if I'd like to live on the Castleham estate, to be honest. But I hear what you're saying. But I mean, the bottom line is for the council is that we've got to build more houses. That's the only thing that's going to actually agitate the whole system upwards. With the massive waiting list we've got. We've got some planning permissions coming, planning applications coming in now. We're looking at hopefully aspiring to 100% affordable housing. Proper council estate. Sort of back to council house building, because we haven't built a house in 30 years. As a council, all the stock got transferred in about 1997 after a vote from the residents, and that's absolutely there are lots of ideas, massive sort of potpourri of ideas that they're out there. But ultimately, I think the council's aim at the moment is to actually get some physical houses built, and there are other agents in the town like Jess's groups and whatever that are really pushing some really innovative ideas to sort of like fill the gaps while we build those houses.
Thanks, Andy. Can I just now go to Quiver O'Gorman, because I wanted to see, Quiver, there's so many comments. Can you draw out any for our panel, any questions that come up or any possible solutions, anything you can see there?
Sure, yeah, there is a lot. I'll just share a comment from Leah Levan regarding council. There are proposals in the town deal going forward that include turning more commercial spaces into homes, and this will also be part of regenerating the town centre post-COVID. I'd also just like to flag on Steve's incredible idea about a property gifting project. His email is in the chat now on Zoom and on Facebook for anyone who wants to get in touch with him. Chris Petts asks, has there ever been a rental system which allows renters to build equity in the property they're renting? And a comment from Mary Carter, lots of interesting suggestions, requires a step change in partnership and collaborations between the council and a variety of alternatives. Also, we shouldn't forget that housing vulnerability and homelessness aren't just about bricks and mortar and access to housing. Hastings has high levels of social problems, many not helped by gentrification. And one last question here from Amy Atkins, is it worth noting the growing trend, most probably due to the ridiculous house prices, in living in van homes and maybe creating a space where these communities can have a base with electricity ports, showers, toilets, etc., a communal hall, a veg patch?
There we go. Thank you, Quiver. We are running tight on time. So what I want to do, just to pick up one of those points about the tenants having access to some increase in equity, there are shared ownership housing schemes that do exist, but again, they're not always as accessible as they need to be. Because we are running short of time, what I want to do, if I can, is just go to each of the panelists and just ask each of you one by one for a sort of 30-second standout soundbite, if you would, perhaps a solution or two that you could throw into the mix. That would be wonderful. Can I start with you, Dr. Susan? Sorry, can I start with you, Susan? Can you give us a sort of 30 seconds takeaway from tonight and some ideas or solutions that we could use here?
So my feeling looking in on this from the outside is that all of the ingredients are there to create the solution, and it needs the commitment of the council to think creatively, and it needs different partners, the private sector and some community activism to really come together. And there's more of a sense of sort of social conscience from landlords, from what I've heard tonight, than we maybe have up in Scotland. So you've got some interesting opportunities. The one thing I do want to say is that Andy mentioned needing to raise a sum of £25 million to buy more properties to try and alleviate the homeless situation. And Andy, you mentioned that was a huge sum of money for you to raise. I've raised £15 million in 4 years to buy properties in Glasgow without having a council behind me and just being a start-up social enterprise. The money, the social investment for housing is absolutely there if we all look hard enough and pull together to make it happen.
Wow, well, that's a very positive note. Thank you so much, Susan. Can we go now to Dot? Is Dot available? Dot Kirk. Dot, can you give us sort of 30 seconds with your experience in Brighton and what you've seen in her tonight? Any solutions, any ideas, anything that stands out for you tonight from what you've heard?
Yeah, I guess like I think that a lot of work needs to be done on like this kind of imbalance of power. And obviously I'm speaking as an incomer to this area. Like I feel like you come in with a lot of power, and there has to be ways of addressing how that power can kind of, I don't know, be leveled, how the playing field can be leveled. And for me, that is community-led housing. I think that's the council looking at how they can go to communities first and look at community ownership first, and building on kind of the assets that you have in your area, looking at how they can be brought into community ownership forever and not sold off for private gain. And then you'll stop losing those assets that you already have as a community. But I also think that there's a really interesting group called The Shift, who came out of work by the UN that Sam referenced earlier in his presentations, and they're a group of lots of different governments, local governments around the world, looking at how you can shift power in your local area and how governments can start looking at housing as a human right and making decisions based on housing as a human right. And I think that's a really interesting resource.
Thank you, Dot. That's brilliant. And can we go to Adam, if Adam's there? Adam, 30 seconds if you're there.
Here I am. Firstly, really quickly, I just want to say that I was quite shocked to hear Andy say that he wouldn't want to live on the Castleham estate, because I think a lot of the time people don't have the privilege of choice, right? And that the Castleham estate is probably quite an awesome alternative to living on the street. But my main point is, what I want to see, like, and I know it's not just all about the council, but like, and it's great that you're able to support, you know, projects like Rock House and stuff. But what I'd really love to see is the council not waiting for people to go and request support, but being real leaders, like being able to find, you know, you obviously know of Rock House. It's not just affordable and secure, but there's the community being built here. I've had work opportunities through the live work thing. I've had you know, mental health support. I've had a landlord who is accessible and personal and is a face, and it's demonstrably sustainable. And I'd love to see the council recognise all of that and be more proactive and take a real lead, a bolder lead, take a chance and get real change made.
Thank you, Adam.
Possible.
That's brilliant. Excellent. Can we then finally just go to Claudine? Claudine, you've got 27 seconds to tell us your takeaway.
Well, I just want to, because nobody mentioned the court ruling in July, where Shelter was able to get a judge to rule that discriminating against DSS tenants was illegal. That was July 2020. And also in August, there was a law that made that you had to give 6 months notice to tenants now, and that will not end until the end of March. And I think that half the problem is a lot of people are leaving their properties as well because they're fearful, and we have to sort of, you know, do something about the sort of intimidation and stuff that's going on.
Thank you, Claudine. Thank you so much. And thank you to all our panelists tonight, to Claudine, to Adam, to Dot, and to Susan. Thank you so much. Now, but before I close, we're not closing because it's so important. We've had a fantastic evening discussing and chatting about all of these issues, but it doesn't end here. The point is, and I think on the screens now in front of you, you should have a link to a website, Changing Hastings. I can't see the suffix, but I think it's .org. This is a conversation. It's hopefully a constructive and a positive conversation, and we really want it to continue so that it can filter and trickle around the town to people that really need to hear it and to be engaged and to get involved. So now is your chance, as I said at the start, to do that. There is that site, changinghastings.org, I think. There is another event coming up on the 23rd of February, being run by, there it is on the screen, again by Hastings Emerging Futures. This is about sustainable Hastings. So please, if you're up for getting involved in that, highly important, saving the planet, doing things that can help us to keep our planet going. That event is going to look at those issues and consider that. So, as I say, as far as tonight is concerned, as far as the gentrification of Hastings is concerned, a hugely positive and constructive debate. Thank you, all of you, for all your questions. We will take them, assimilate them, and we will get and we'll take some of the actions that have been put in those comments away with us. Hopefully, there are links in there as well that you can engage with and get involved in this debate. And as I say, this is the start. There will be future events coming up. So thank you ever so much to all of you for watching, to our witnesses, to Andy Battsford and to Billy Darlington, to our wonderful panelists, to Buddha Triangle, to Lucas the Peaceful Poet, and to all of you. See you all very soon. Thank you very much.